If there was any doubt that Russell T Davies was the brand new showrunner for Doctor Who, it's that the fans already hate him. With the release of the Destination Skaro Children in Need sketch, we got footage, we got confirmation, we got Julian Bleach as a pre-accident, pre-disfigurement Davros. Now, for folks of you who may not know, Davros is a character from the classic series and also has had appearances in the revival played by Julian Bleach. He's been played by a variety of actors during the classic series: Michael Wisher, David Goodison, Terry Malloy, etc. He has been routinely depicted as a character in a life support travel machine modelled off a Dalek base with one arm. He is blind, but he does have a blue light on his forehead which allows him to see. He has also had this appearance throughout almost the entirety of the series, with the exception of Remembrance of the Daleks, where he was basically just a head inside of the Dalek Emperor casing. Also, in the beginning of Revelation of the Daleks, he is just a head, but it turns out that that was a ploy. Spoilers for a 40-year-old story. And then in the revived series, he's been played by Julian Bleach, and they just took him back to basics with that version. But then we see Julian Bleach outside of makeup, and Russell T Davies gave this reasoning for it.
We had long conversations about bringing Davros back because he's a fantastic character. Time and society and culture and taste has moved on, and there's a problem with the Davros of old in that he's a wheelchair user who is evil. And I had problems with that, and a lot of us on the production team had the problems with that, of associating disability with evil. And trust me, there's a very long tradition of this. I'm not blaming people in the past at all, but the world changes, and when the world changes, Doctor Who has to change as well. So we made the choice to bring back Davros without the facial scarring and without the wheelchair or his support unit, which functions as a wheelchair. I say, this is how we see Davros now. This is what he looks like. This is 2023. This is our lens. This is our eye. Things used to be in black and white. They're not in black and white anymore. And Davros used to look like that, and he looks like this now. And that we are absolutely standing by. I think because it's Children in Need night, it's a night where issues of disability or otherness or being excluded from society come right to the front of the conversation. So of all the nights to make this change, I think it was absolutely vital to do this. And I'm very, very, very proud of the fact that we have.
Now, I wanted to play the entirety of that clip just so that we're on the same playing field in terms of what he actually said, because I have seen some strong and genuine arguments against the change. I genuinely have. I don't want to say just because you are unhappy with the change, you are wrong, or vice versa. I do not want to be taking that approach at all. However, I've seen so much over the past couple of days where people are attributing things to Russell T Davies he just objectively, factually, based on that clip, did not say. We do have a super chat from Time Lord Rick. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Honestly, I think Russell's own words about Loki sum it up. Quote, a ridiculous, craven, feeble gesture. Harsh words. I feel like I'm quoting Kent Brockman from The Simpsons. Harsh words. Harsh, deliberate words, or whatever the quote is. Now, I don't want people to think that I am going to try and villainize the people who don't follow my opinion or my thought process on this. I actually think that is a very interesting and nuanced conversation. However, it has struck me that people are approaching this conversation with zero nuance, with, ironically enough, the people who are really lambasting Russell T Davies for this decision are approaching this with less thought than he applied for this. Now, folks have been saying, oh, I've never associated disabilities with evil. I've never associated disabilities with being a bad person. Oh, cool. Awesome. Good for you. Doesn't mean it's not a trope, though. It is a trope to the extent it even has its own TV tropes page. The Evil Cripple. We have here a character from Resident Evil. This is a trope that has been on screen for no joke over a century. It has been in literature for centuries as well. You even go on to Doctor Who here. The delegate from Arcturus from Curse of Peladon is an example of this trope. Davros is on this page as well. The captain from the pirate planet has an artificial arm and an eye patch. The heroic Dr. Judson from the Curse of Fenric inverts this by standing up out of his wheelchair at the end of the story. Lady Cassandra, John Lumic, Voyage of the Damned, Max Capricorn, the burnt version of the Master as well. Honestly, this page is long. And obviously, a TV tropes page is not going to be a full depiction of this. There's also, yes, absolutely true. However, when people have been making memes like, oh, Captain Hook if he was written by Russell T Davies, or Blofeld if he was written by Russell T Davies, and notice how they are all villains. This is an undeniable trend. Whether or not you noticed it is a different matter, but it is undeniably a form of visual shorthand which has persisted to the point of becoming normalized, whether it be James Bond villains, whether it be Captain Hook, etc. Darth Vader, as Lorgasm says, the fact that he has the raspy breathing, the fact that he is in a life support suit, it's to dehumanize him, which obviously works as visual shorthand because you can't see Darth Vader in the eyes. You have that sort of detachment from the character, which makes it harder to empathize with. It's shorthand. It's the same visual shorthand that you use in Genesis of the Daleks to make the boy soldiers look like SS soldiers because they've got the uniforms and they do the salute. It's a storytelling tool which can be applied. So to say what people aren't allowed to do, here's the thing. No one is saying this. This is stuff I've been seeing all over the past couple of weeks. No one has been saying this. For example, you've got one individual, and I don't want to lambast this person. He seems like an awesome guy. I've seen him at conventions. Davros Dalek Century. You may have seen him. He goes around conventions and charities and stuff dressed as in a really cool Davros chair because he loves the character. And I think he is actually a wheelchair user himself. And that's really, really cool. However, he disagrees with this change, which is fine. But he says in his Twitter thread, evil comes in all forms, all races, all genders, all abilities, and all disabilities. We cannot stand by and allow the cancellation of something for fear of offence that actually doesn't exist. I showed the full clip at the beginning of this segment. Nobody said this. No one is saying this. We've got this tweet as well. I was horrified to hear that the BBC had labelled wheelchair users and disabilities as evil, as it took me 7 months to build my Davros chair. No one is fucking saying this. You are shadowboxing. You are strawmanning. This is not what Russell T Davies said. And when we've got people like, for example, Ian Levine, who we can laugh at, speaking out as a disabled man in a wheelchair, I am highly offended by Russell T Davies' claim to change Davros to no longer be in a wheelchair for fear of offending people like me. What the hell comes next? Changing a Dalek for fear of offending a salt shaker? World gone mad. No one is talking about fear of offending people like you. Like I said, we played the clip. Russell didn't say that. If you want to have the conversation, you have to actually meet him where he's at. No shadowboxing, no strawmanning. Actually meet him where he's at. And also, changing a Dalek for fear of offending salt shakers, it shows that he's not intelligent enough to have this sort of conversation. Because this sentence here shows you do not have the capacity to have this conversation. Jesus Christ. Ian Levine was quoted in The Sun as well. The Sun. Disabled fans' fury at woke makeover. Doctor Who fans were left outraged after iconic villain Davros returned to the show standing up and no longer disfigured. The Dalek's creator has been depicted with withered features and a mobile life support unit since first appearing in 1975, but when actor Julian Bleach reprised the role on Friday for Children in Need special, he was able-bodied and unscathed. And then they quote Ian Levine, and they also quote Rob Keeley as well. There's no mention in this segment, in this article, that this is a prequel. There is no mention in this article that Destination Skaro takes place pre-disfigurement. The framing of this article is deliberately done to make people think that this is a blatant change to the character and the continuity. What people seem to be forgetting is that Destination Skaro is unabashedly a prequel. That this is pre-disfigurement Davros. He wasn't born without legs. He wasn't born with one arm. He wasn't born blind and burnt. It happened to him at some point. Obviously, this is clearly just them obscuring the truth. Of course it's The Sun. Of course they've got Piers Morgan writing. It all makes sense. It all adds together. It's just frustrating that there is an interesting conversation to be had about this. There is an interesting conversation about the evil cripple archetype, etc. All of that. There is an interesting conversation to be had. Why aren't people having it? And of course, I know what you folks are asking. What does Steph Coburn think of this? What a likely terminal joke Doctor Who fans are who obsess over fictional Davros, a villain in a children's TV show, while ignoring the real monsters, as psychopathic as any Dalek, who meet every year in Davos to plan their real campaigns of global subjugation and extermination. Steph means Jews. I have heard a lot of pedantry over the past couple of days saying, but Davros doesn't have a wheelchair. Davros doesn't have a wheelchair. It's a life support system. This is just splitting hairs to an obnoxious degree. I'm so sorry. Firstly, in this TV show itself, in the text, it's described as a chair. The Doctor describes it as a chair. And also, in Terry Nation's original scripts for Genesis of the Daleks, he says that Davros is, quote, in a wheelchair of very complex design. On another page here, Davros is contained in a specially constructed self-powered wheelchair. It's a chair that moves because he cannot walk. For all intents and purposes, it is a wheelchair. Can we please stop with the pedantry and have a bit of an actual legitimate conversation about this? So, when it comes to the change in the future, I do think that Russ T Davies was a little bit clumsy with his wording. I don't think that comparing a lens from 2023 to a lens from the 1970s is akin to watching TV in black and white and now watching it in colour. For a guy who literally writes for a living, he's a writer, he's a wordsmith, I think he definitely could have used a much better, much more apt metaphor. I also think that, yes, in the clip, he is a little bit of self-aggrandizing here. He says, I'm super duper proud that we've made this decision. Yes, it's not the best. I will fully admit that. It is not the best. He's not disabled, my brother in Christ, he has no legs and one arm, and he's blind. Now, I don't want to try and step over other people on the conversation. I've heard a lot of people with disabilities, with physical disabilities. I am technically disabled, but I am able-bodied, and I am, I don't look disabled, whatever on earth that means, in quotes. I have an invisible disability, I think is the actual term. But yes, I do think that there is a little bit of self-aggrandizing here. I completely get that. But I also think that folks need to remember the context of this sketch. And if you've just watched this sketch on YouTube and you haven't watched the actual telethon or what it was attached to, I think that's important context. Russ T Davies is talking about the context of showing Davros during Children in Need. Can you imagine Children in Need is broadcasting, and you have, half an hour before the broadcast of the special, you've got this segment here with a young wheelchair user, a child who are raising money forward. With Children in Need, they're trying to depict disabilities and disabled children specifically in a good light. Okay, great. And then all of a sudden, no, it's Davros, and he's literally a Nazi leader. It's not the best look. And you've also got Lenny Henry, who is a guest star in Doctor Who next year. He's one of the hosts. I forget his name. What's the name of the other gentleman who does Children in Need? He was in the wheelchair. This gentleman, whose name I'm very sorry, I'm terrible at pronunciations. Adi Adipitan, who is also a disabled host who hosts Children in Need. Did I say Lenny Henry? I meant to say Lenny Rush. I apologize. He also tends to host Children in Need and Comic Relief and stuff. Lenny Rush, not Lenny Henry. The irony does not escape me that many Doctor Who fans are having a go at Russ T Davies for doing something that they find quite difficult, and that's reading the room. Now, there is the segment of the interview where he says, this is how we're going to be depicting Davros moving forward. This is what we're going to be doing moving forward. The character was disabled on screen, but now we're not going to depict him like that. Which seems to imply that he does have plans for Davros in the near future, played by Julian Bleach potentially, but definitely not in his chair. Definitely not with the makeup and the prosthetics. People have taken that line, that interview segment, and have just completely run wild with it by saying, oh, Genesis of the Daleks, Destiny, Revelation, or all of these previous appearances from Davros in the classic series and the revived series are now wiped from canon? As if Russell T Davies has broken into their house and stolen their DVD copy of Destiny of the Daleks. And then he threw it back out the window because Destiny of the Daleks is not very good, so he threw it back into the house. That's obviously not what's happening. Come on, folks. Have a bit of maturity, please. We also are arguing over a future appearance that hasn't manifested yet. We don't know what the plan is. If he does a Davros story in the next few years, it could be another prequel akin to this. It could be another pre-Genesis of the Daleks appearance, or maybe it could be something that picks up from the ending of The Witcher's Familiar, where Davros had the regeneration energy. firstly, Davros is a fictional character. He can be rewritten and unwritten or whatever. He's a fictional character. And it's also a time travel show, so a prequel is fine. But we've got to stress, these are future appearances that have not happened yet. People are preempting the argument. People are preempting the backlash. People are preempting outrage. They're preempting scorn, which is not a healthy way to approach any topic. It explains why you have so many people saying, oh, the BBC and Rusty Davis have labelled disabled users as evil. They've labelled wheelchair users as bad. And they are so... No, it's why they are so defensive. And partly because a lot of this is just reactionary culture war nonsense. And also, a lot of these people, conservatives or whatever, people who write for The Sun or whatever, don't even want disabled people in media in general. Like, we saw this when Flux broadcast and people got pissed off at Nadia Albina for just existing in Doctor Who. An actress with one arm who worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company and such. But no, apparently, that's just terrible. That's woke. That's diversity hires. And so, I don't believe you. I don't believe your outrage. I don't believe that you're coming at this from a genuine place. With words given, I'll say, I get Rusty Davis's decision, but Davros is more than his wheelchair. He is a result of war, a scientist, a Nazi allegory. Davros is a villain who's in a wheelchair, not a villain because he is in a wheelchair, in my opinion. That's absolutely correct. I completely get it. It makes sense. But the thing is that once again, we need to look at this from the context of children in need. Not everybody watching the telethon, not everybody working with children in need, people associated with it, or people watching the skit in general, know about the backstory. They would just see Nazi scientist in a wheelchair, and the shorthand just completely further applies itself. Like, obviously, Davros is a complex character. He is more than his wheelchair, obviously, and fans have got to love him over the past 50 years. The issue is that he is part of a massive media landscape that have used the same shorthand that Terry Nation did in the 1970s, and has been applied to James Bond villains. It goes as far back as the Hunchback of Notre Dame, from Igor in Frankenstein. Except, like, these, obviously, you can look at those characters and you can talk about how they're actually really complex and lovely, or they're not really the bad guys, things like that. But the shorthand persists. The shorthand is there, whether it's well-intentioned or not. That's just the complicated part of media. It's just how it is. I just think that it's been blown massively out of proportion because it is it's a complex topic that people don't want a complex conversation around. So it naturally gets distilled to, it's a woke change for woke reasons and things like that. The problem is it's a very lengthy, multifaceted problem here. Still within the range of possibility that they adapt I, Davros, which detailed his upbringing and indoctrination in the Khalid bunker. Pretty please. Yeah, Big Finish have already delved into a pre-Genesis of the Daleks Davros, which I've not listened to. It's there. I'm going to listen to it. I've got it downloaded. I guess I haven't got around to it yet. But yeah, diving into the I, Davros stuff, doing an actual, like, political drama. I imagine years and years, but it's Doctor Who on Skaro. That sounds like a really cool idea. When an old white guy acts like he's fixed something for a minority group, my eyebrows raise. Now, to be fair to Russell, obviously, it's the grandizing, but I also think he's trying to speak with conviction, so he's like, yes, this is the decision that we've confidently made. I get why he's done it, but the optics aren't great. And considering how, like, present and aware of optics Rusty Davis is, it seems a bit uncharacteristic of him. But to be fair, when people are saying, like, why doesn't, Rusty Davis has done these tropes before with Lumic in Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel, with Max Capricorn in Voyage of the Damned. Firstly, that was, no joke, nearly 20 years ago. It would have been 2004, 2005 when Russell was writing and signing off on those decisions. When it comes to Lumic, though, Roger Lloyd Packy broke his leg before the filming of that story, so that's why they had to hastily build the wheelchair life support system for him. He wasn't meant to be in a wheelchair. He wasn't meant to be as overtly disabled as he was depicted. But obviously, the point still stands. In the upcoming series of Doctor Who, he's cast Ruth Madeley. In the 60th anniversary specials, he's cast Lenny Rush. He is actually working to try and have more positive disabled representation on screen. And is this a case of overcorrection? Possibly. But like I said, it fits within the canon of the show because it's Genesis of the Daleks prequel. And it gave us an opportunity for Julian Bleach to play the role in an interesting way. People keep back to, like, he wrote those episodes. He he was the showrunner. He does sign off on those decisions. He does script edit, in a manner of speaking. He didn't write them, but he does endorse the decisions. He does sign off on the decisions, especially as a producer where he does actually have to, justify the expenses and stuff. And yeah, like I said, that was like 15, 20 years ago. I reject the idea that people can't change or regret their own writing decisions in the past, even if you've played into those tropes before, for example. There's like a lot of the discourse and the backlash and the discussion. I think so much of this tries to remove Russell T Davis's agency as a writer. Like, I think that there's so much in the conversation that requires Russell T Davis to be doing this for pandering. He's doing this for woke points. He's doing this because he's worried about backlash. He's worried about offending people and stuff, even though from this interview, that's not exactly the intent. It was something that he says that he and his creatives and people he talks to felt uncomfortable with in the context of a children in need Davros depiction. And like I said, he's worked with disabled actors before. He works and he promotes like diversity and representation in media and stuff. He actually works with people who have a stake in this conversation. So he's more qualified than a lot of people, even a lot of people, even me, for example. It makes sense. Yeah, the hypocrite you wrote, Max Capricorn Improver. Yeah, people change. There are things that I wrote about or advocated for 10, 15 years ago that I regret, and I'm the exact opposite now, So much of this removes Rusty Davis's agency as a writer in order to simplify the conversation, in order to say he's doing this because he's woke, he's doing this because of backlash for not offending anybody. It's trying to dumb down a very difficult conversation. And I also think that so much of Doctor Who as a fandom has kind of outed itself over this past week, which, regardless of what side of the conversation you are on, whether you are happy with this decision or not, it shows that you are not quite ready to have a conversation like this. That might sound a bit high and mighty of me, but if you're like Ian Levine and you're trying to say stuff like, oh, you're going to cancel the Daleks because you're worried about offending Pepper Potts or whatever, I don't think you're intelligent enough to have this conversation. I'm sorry. And also, Ian Levine starting a petition, a government petition, to change Davros back. Please have some perspective. Please, I'm begging of you to have some thought here. It's very cool for Julian Bleach, of course, in this performance, to be able to showcase his acting and his incredible voice as Davros, which apparently he can just do without voice modulation, without the prosthetics. He's so good in this short. And the fact that we could be seeing more of Julian Bleach Davros like this, that kind of has me a bit excited. Like I said, it's a complex conversation. I think with this, Russell T Davis maybe... I don't want to say he used a hammer when he should have used a scalpel, but he did use something a bit more brute force than a scalpel, but not quite as hard as a hammer. And I also think that the conversation itself and the fact that he has given this thought, this consideration, shows that his heart is definitely in the right place for it. Once again, the context, children in need. Can we please not ignore the sodding context here? It shows that his heart's in the right place, and I would rather have a writer who gives that sort of thought, even if it is overcorrection, than, say, a writer who will have a doctor expose a brown-skinned master to the Nazis with the words, "Now they'll see the real you." There's definitely degrees here, and I would rather have that level of thought, the former, than the complete lack of the unintended consequences for the latter. I wouldn't have a problem with it if Rusty Davis didn't apply that this how Davros would be from now on. Yeah, like I said, I think it's a bit of a brute force approach, and I don't know why he said that. In terms, why would you even say that when you're just talking about this particular skit or segment? If you've got future plans, awesome. Just, maybe hold them closer to your chest this time. But people interpreting that as, oh, Genesis of the Daleks has now been rewritten so Davros was able-bodied, that's ridiculous. Even like I said, that's a legitimate a complaint or concern. I don't know what the exact word would be for that, but it's a legitimate thought to have, and then you just fucking go into bananas land, and it's oh, now Destiny of the Daleks, Davros was able-bodied because of Russ. I don't even know where you get that from. the Dodgems joke was more offensive. Yeah, Destiny of the Daleks, and also The Magician's Apprentice and The Witcher's Familiar. Those stories are just the 4th and the 12th Doctor, respectively, just bullying a disabled war veteran for like half of the runtime. Since there hasn't been a good Davros episode since Remembrance of the Daleks, maybe the character should be retired from screen. I'll disagree with you there. I do think that Davros is very good in The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. But I take the point. Maybe you don't even need, like, only 106 likes. There's only 300 of you watching. God's sake, chat. Fix that immediately. Davis from Broke Cannon as well, friend of the live stream, has also made the very legitimate observation that, you know, maybe you should retire the character. Maybe Davros's stories have all been told. And if you want the expanded universe stuff, if you want something a bit more thought-provoking, if you want that prequel stuff, there is Big Finish there. The iDavros stories are frequently on sale, and they are quite cheap as well. I'll go against what you're saying, Mr. Talis, but what does this apply to the Cybermen? That's interesting. Now, that is also interesting, because that does actually go into the same trope. That really does, in terms of, like, the prosthetic limbs. But it is there to make a more broader societal statement about augmented limbs. That's a really good observation on her. Yeah, that is good. This is such a complicated topic, which is, I love talking about this. I'm just so frustrated that people are dragging the conversation down. But yeah, in my review of The 10th Planet, I actually do dive into the origins of the Cybermen. Actually, I'll give you folks a teaser, because I'm so nice like that. Pedler mulled over ideas in the garden with his wife, psychiatrist Una de Freeston, who was quoted as saying, "We were discussing spare parts surgery, and conceived the idea of someone with so many mechanical replacements that he didn't know whether he was human or a machine. He said it was his worst horror of what he was like. That is, all intellect and no love." So the Cybermen were actually a deeply personal nightmare, a recurring dream that Kit Pedler would have of, you know, so it's not meant to be a political statement. It is meant to be akin to, like, a Ship of Theseus, because he was also quite interested in his philosophy. It was a personal nightmare of the dehumanization of people, mainly of the mind, but the physical aspect still runs true. The idea of these are like medical patients. These are disabled people who have been quote unquote fixed with mechanical replacements. That is a very intelligent look at the trope, whether it's like consciously or not, but it is still part of the trope. It is the dehumanizing nature of people with disabilities or medical patients and stuff like that. You can't really properly see their eyes effectively. They don't communicate with normal voices. It's part of the trope. It's part of, like, it makes sense, but the Cybermen do fit into this as well. Maybe not so overtly, like visually, but conceptually they absolutely do. Spare Parts is quite good and dark. Yeah, Spare Parts is so good. I Want Father to See My Uniform is devastating. So good. That's one thing about Davros in particular. He is a very memorable, iconic villain who has been depicted this way for 50 years. Depicting him this way for a prequel absolutely works out. But I think that using this decision moving forward needs a bit more justification. And the fact that we don't get that justification, we just get this like marketing spin in Doctor Who Unleashed, well-intentioned, is clumsy. Wouldn't the Daleks also fall into the trope as they're technically genetically wounded? The fact that they're aliens and that they're now like blob-like creatures, I think that it's too abstract. Thematically you could, but the visual association of like Dr. Strangelove, of somebody in a wheelchair who was like an evil Nazi scientist, somebody like Davros who, you know, has been disfigured but is essentially a war veteran, a victim of war, and he does speak as well in like a human voice that is slightly modulated. I want to emphasize there is a discussion to be had here. So let's actually have it. There is definitely a form of reclamation, of reclaiming the trope of the evil cripple. That's what the TV tropes page called it. And yes, so I understand when people get very defensive over characters like Daleks, like the Cybermen, like Lumic or Max Capricorn, my name is Max, etc. People, the reclamation, I get it. But it's also similar to like the queer-coded villains, like, you know, Scar from The Lion King, Ursula from The Little Mermaid, a lot of Disney animated films. a lot of queer coding in the theatre, a lot of queer coding in media and stuff like that, in order to like sort of boost representation. Because you like it was like the Comics Code Authority and the was it the Hays Code? It was basically you can't depict LGBTQ plus people in media unless they're the villains, which is why that's how the trope basically started. So people like to reclaim that. You know, people love Ursula, people love Scar, people love the camp villains in Disney films and in theatre and stuff like that. But it's still a trope. We can acknowledge that, right? Like, we can acknowledge that the trope exists. I've seen people try and just dispel the notion that it's a trope at all. And it's not just people as well that this happens to. We basically acknowledge at this point now that Jaws, the Steven Spielberg movie from the late 1970s, and also the book that it was based on, had a negative effect on the perception of sharks from the general public, making them, you know, feared and overhunted and things like that. Like, media does influence people. You know, a prolific enough project, a prolific enough piece of representation can have a negative effect, even if it's unintentional, even if it's done with the best of intentions. Even Rusty Davis points out in that Unleashed interview, he's not blaming anyone in the past because it was a shorthand. It was an effective visual shorthand in a medium where you only had 25 minutes a week. They tend to ignore humans. They do. And if they do bite a human, it's because they think they're like a manatee or like a sea lion or something. If you can acknowledge that something like Jaws can negatively hamper the perception of sharks, even if you love Jaws, even if you love shark movies, you know that the perception's there, right? If you can acknowledge that and the power of media and representation, in this case, shark representation, then you've got to acknowledge that that can happen and has happened for people with disabilities. And obviously, just because you didn't see the evil cripple trope and thought, just because you saw that trope or that pervasive depiction in media for centuries, if you were, just because you didn't pick up on that, great for you. Lovely. Thank you for virtue signaling to me, mate. I fully get the context of Children in Need Night and it being a prequel to Genesis, but for Davros to be going this way forward, I'm not so sure. No, I understand that trepidation. I also think that it's going to be an awful lot of narrative jumping through hoops to have Davros depicted similar to this post Magician's Apprentice. That's going to be a bit of a hurdle. It can be done. Davros is fictional. It makes sense. It's like I even saw somebody say, "Oh, if Hitler was in a wheelchair, like Hitler was a real person." Like I said, complex topic. Stupid people having the conversation. I put a stupid ape, stupid monkey man. King Kong negatively affected gorillas too. King Kong also plays into these tropes, but for race. It's the savages from Skull Island, and King Kong is meant to be like a depiction of African American taking the virtues of the white woman. Like, that's what it was. That's how it was done. Obviously, people have, reclaimed King Kong as a heroic character who beats up Godzilla with an axe made of Godzilla's dorsal fins, but, these characters, once again, we're removing the agency of the writers with these conversations. These people, writers, directors, creators, create these characters for specific reasons, with specific values that they want to, whether subliminally or intentionally or whatever, it still happens. I know actors with dwarfism whose main paycheck every year is playing dwarfs in pantomime. That's sort of their main representation, in media. At least routinely, not exclusively. Obviously, I'm not claiming to speak up on behalf of actors with dwarfism, but then they try and make the most out of the roles. They try and make the dwarf characters in pantomime, like Snow White and other fairy tales and stuff. They try and imbue them with more fun elements, make them more endearing, make them extra villainous if they're villains, make them extra heroic or camp if they're. But with that, there is a sense of reclaiming and overcorrection or trying to do something different with the trope. It's still a trope and it's still something that's kind of instilled. This is, like I said, it's a really complex conversation, but I'm loving this chat with you folks. You chads are awesome. But yeah, so when it comes to disabled actors, and sometimes they're I'll flip it in the chat. No doubt somebody's going to take that out of context and say, "Hey, Miss Titus think King Kong is a black guy." That actually happened with what's it called? It's Red and Blue. They do those PowerPoint presentations that are really good. I forget their name, but yeah, that literally happened on Twitter when like they pointed out that basically objective observable fact, and people were like, oh, they're clearly racist because that's how they interpreted King Kong. Like, no. When it comes to disabled representation, sometimes the main recurring jobs, sometimes the main recurring paycheck that act Overly Sarcastic Productions, thank you, Time Lorick, their main paycheck is going to be disabled roles, or for many people it is disabled roles, people who maybe look unconventional or they are in a wheelchair and stuff like that. We need to acknowledge that this is a trope. And was this a bit of overcorrection? Quite possibly. But I also I don't think it behooves anyone to get angry at future portrayals of Davros that literally have not happened yet. This is why I say in my review that we should cross that bridge when we come to it. Jeffrey Beaver's master fit into this argument, a £2 super chat from Nathan. Yes, it was on the TV tropes page. Yes, it's the idea of the dehumanizing nature. The master is literally a monster at this stage of his life, and he's depicted now as a burn victim. Like, it's a trope. Anyone who denies Davros's chair is in a wheelchair is on top tier copium. He's a humanoid character. Can he walk without it? No, then it's a wheelchair. Yeah, just because we don't literally see the wheels does not mean it is not a wheelchair. Do I feel Russell will still be using the queer villain trope? Neil Patrick Harris is trying to make him Jinx Monsoon's unknown character, or do you feel like we're falling into that trope from what we've seen? I was thinking that too. Thank you so much to Andrew. The number a bit, but thank you so much to Andrew for subscribing during the live stream. I had this exact same thought actually the other day, because we do see Neil Patrick Harris in the trailer for the 60th anniversaries. Maybe it's in the other trailer. We see this shot from The Giggle. So yeah, I think that Rusty Davis may be playing into the queer villain trope here. No one's perfect, but I'm not going to get bent out of shape based on a shot from a trailer. Who knows what's happening here? But also, Neil Patrick Harris does have priors for playing a musical-inspired villain for iconic long-running franchises. He was the Music Meister. You know, he was the best Batman villain, the Music Meister. But yeah, it is a trope, and it is a trope that Russell will likely lean into again, or has, because it's visual shorthand, and it is pervasive, and it persists. But just because Russell tried to make a good change here does not mean he is immune to these tropes or perfect or whatever. But, you know, it's complicated conversations. RTD makes everyone queer or bi. That's true. We only have the one queer-coded villain because everyone else is gay. Also, a gay showrunner would know better than most by using the queer villain trope. Oh, yeah, true. And Jinx Monsoon, too. We don't know what Jinx Monsoon is. We've only seen images. I see why people are associating that. I don't want to dive too deeply down that rabbit hole right now, though, because we've not even seen footage. Thank you so much to Alex Simpkin for the £5 super chat. Also, Rusty Davis' first original villain was a trans woman with Cassandra O'Brien. Delta 17. Yes, that was, queer villain trope. And Russell, I've not seen the quote myself, but I've seen a lot of people echo it over the past week, saying that apparently Russell regretted that. So, that, like I said, this was like 20 years ago. Cassandra was trans. Oh, I don't remember. Oh, yeah, there's the line of dialogue when she's overlooking Earth with Rose, and she's like, that's where I used to live when I was a little boy down there. It's a throwaway line, played a little bit of a comedy. Wait, does she actually say that? Do I need to play the clip? Doctor Who. I love going to the Whoniverse tab. End of the world. Oh, God, quick word with Michael Jackson. That's probably not the best. Remember when Jabe calls Rose a prostitute?
That's where I used to live when I was a little boy down there.
When I was a little boy down there. That's the line.
All of them.
Thank you to Natty Bateman for the incredibly generous £20 super chat. This is slightly different, but my tutor, I'm a wheelchair user, but he said to me I should be in the Paralympics. It was positive, but still a stereotype. I had no interest in sport. It annoyed me at the time. Yeah, there is, for example... I do not want to speak on behalf of disabled people, of course. That's not my place. But I do hear stories about that all the time. This sort of slight infantilization. There are actors with dwarfism find it a little bit infantilizing to kneel down to chat to them. Wheelchair users as well. It's oh, get down on your level like a child would. Yeah. But a lot of it just comes from well-meaning people. but everyone has the blind spots. Remember how petty people were at the idea of a new TARDIS being wheelchair friendly? Oh God, don't even get me started. Like, yeah, when it was rumored that the new TARDIS would have ramps for potential wheelchair users, and the theory at the time was that Wilfred Mott, played by Bernard Cribbins, the late Bernard Cribbins, because we've seen him on location in a wheelchair, that he'd be able to get around the TARDIS set, it'd be pushed around the TARDIS set because no steps. Yeah, and people were just like, oh, it's woke. Like, oh my God, just catering to basic needs is considered woke now. But yeah, so going back to Natty Bateman's point, hi Winnie, I like the idea of like people don't mean to be mean, but like when a wheelchair user is in a shop and maybe somebody moves them out of the way to get to a shelf without their permission, it takes away their agency. There's an awful lot of like blind spots that people have, and a reason a lot of people have these blind spots is because of bad representation in media. Media, it's a machine for generating empathy, as the late great Roger Ebert would say. People think, oh yeah. I obviously cannot claim personal experience, but talk to disabled people. Lift up their voices when necessary and appropriate, or just generally speaking. Obviously, you don't need to. They are not a monolith. I have seen people with disabilities who have liked the change for Davros, and I've seen people with disabilities who dislike the change to Davros. They are not a monolith, just like any other represented group or any other marginalized group. They are not a monolith. Isn't 14 crouching down in front of Ruth Mady's couch in the tray? I think he's just sat down. Questions for later. Yeah, people talk around me like I'm not there, like the person behind me. Yeah, and also like. I used to know somebody, well, I still technically know them, we just haven't spoken in a while, with cerebral palsy. And they told me that they feel like people slow down their speaking, like they're speaking to a child, like they're speaking to somebody with a cognitive impairment or somebody who might be a bit slow. But no, they've got cerebral palsy. They can still hear everything. They are still of sound mind. Representation matters, Also, remember Max Capricorn? Yeah, Max Capricorn. He's, to be fair, going to play slight defense here. Max Capricorn is not an inhuman monster because he's disabled. He's an inhuman monster because he's a capitalist. Mwah. Hey, Winnie. You ready to burn down the world? Personally, I think the fuss about Davros is totally out of context. Oh, yeah, but I think it needs to be out of context in order for people to get riled up the way that they do. Obviously, people are passionate about it because it's a long-running character in a sci-fi British institution, but how's your other cat? He's doing just fine. I think it's bad to bash on the intent. Yeah, I think so too. But apparently just being nice and reading the room is woke, so, yeah.